Welcome back. This is Station 6, and that was a great break. Thank you for sticking around. We're going to talk to Mr. John Myers about the CompVR, also known as the CVR. It is iconic, and John Myers is going to tell you why. John, drop some bass.
All righty. Well, here we are with the CompVR woofer. And you might be asking, why are we talking about the CompVR woofer? You know, this thing's been around since actually 1998. Just a couple of years after Kip and I started, we introduced this woofer. But as we've been talking about, every woofer has a specific, place in the lineup. We've got about 10 woofer lines, and that means that we got any woofer that you guys are possibly going to need to get the sound and the performance you're looking for. But the CompVR basically came from your input. Hey, we want this. We want a woofer that handles more power. We want a woofer that has more output. We want bigger bass response. So that's why we listened to you guys and we came up with the CompVR. So a couple interesting things about this speaker is the fact that you look at the surround on this, and you guys have probably seen them if you looked at kicker woofers and in the recent past, it's got ribs around it. Well, without these ribs, a speaker that has a lot of cone travel, I think you guys have probably seen some of those videos where the woofers are moving like this far and the surround's just buckling and creasing. Well, that does two bad things. One, it doesn't sound good. The other thing, it can damage the surround after time. So in 1998, we actually pioneered the whole rib surround thing, and that's to get more cone travel without that flexing surround, without it causing distortion and noise. So more importantly, that Santoprene surround, which is a modified polypropylene, it's once again a lot more durable than a foam surround, is not going to make any noise whatsoever. And we've got this great double stitching to this injection molded cone. Two different ways to make the woofer cone. You can vacuum form them or you can injection mold them. Injection molded cones are a lot more expensive, but they're a lot more precise and a lot more durable. That's why every single kicker woofer uses an injection molded cone. Here again, if we look at the back of this speaker, you've got the gasket to help it seal to the enclosure so you don't have any air leaks. We talked before about that perimeter venting, that cone brace vent for that smoother, deeper bass with less power. And of course, you got that big bump on the back plate. If you guys remember that Comp RT woofer, that bump was actually on the inside, so that whole motor structure was just turned upside down. So it still has great cone travel, great performance, but it doesn't have all that depth. But you might be wondering, why the CompVR? This thing's been out for, a long time. Well, just remember, just because you've had a CompVR for years, this is not necessarily the same exact woofer. In fact, we constantly improve our products. We keep the model name, just like Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler do by keeping the Mustangs, the Camaros, the Chargers, the Challengers. All those cars have been around for many years, but the new ones are a lot more sophisticated and a lot more refined. Same thing with our woofers. Though it says CompVR like it did in 1998, it's no longer the same woofer it used to be. It's much, much better. So this woofer was also offered in some incredible enclosures, but for one reason or another, they kind of faded away in popularity. But we listened to you guys. You guys kept saying, hey, you guys make some of the best boxes. In fact, we're the #1 loaded enclosure manufacturer in the world. So we listened and you guys said, hey, we want to have this thing in an enclosure. Why don't you bring that CompVR enclosure back because, hey, I don't want to build one and I can't build it as good or look as nice as you guys do. So that's why we brought back the CompVR enclosures. This is the 12-inch hatchback enclosure, and it's a little bigger than it used to be. So you're looking at about 23 inches of width, you're looking at about 16 inches of height, and you've got a bottom depth of 15 inches and a top depth of 11 inches. The reason we do that is we're going to give you a little bit of a slant on that enclosure, so when you slide it up against the back seat of your hatchback, it's going to use up all that available room, and it's still going to give you room to put other things in the trunk. So at 400 watts power handling in this box, it's pretty awesome. But if you're going to build your own enclosure, you just want the raw woofers, the CompVR is available in 10, 12, and 15-inch versions. And if you want more bass than this one offers, back behind me, we got the 800-watt dual 12. Both of these boxes feature that front-loading port that's going to couple better with the woofer for even more bass response and more output and a deeper, smoother sound. So once you get your woofer, your box, you get it all in the vehicle, you're not done there. We highly recommend one of these awesome speaker grills. Now these speaker grills are going to protect your speaker. You don't want anything hitting the cone. It's getting later in October, you're getting closer to Halloween, you decide you need to go shopping for some Halloween supplies. So you go to the Halloween store, you buy a bag of plastic rats, you throw them in the trunk. You don't want those rattling on the cone because once again, the worst thing you can have in your trunk are some rat tails. Well, it's a Halloween thing anyway. So you don't want anything rubbing on the cone of the speaker because it's going to cause noise and it can actually damage the speaker. So don't forget those speaker grills and don't forget these two awesome CompVR boxes. Load them up in your car and go bang around on Halloween and trick or treat.
Rat tails, John?
Rat tails.
Now, I got to say, on John's behalf, he and his wife throw some amazing Halloween parties. So if you get invited, the answer is yes.
Yeah, that was her idea.
First question is, how does this CompVR perform from the one versus the 1990s VR?
Well, obviously, it's going to have a much better cone because now they're injection molded. It's going to have this great grill. The Santoprene surround has been improved. The thermal performance of the speaker has been improved. So generally, all around, this speaker is basically the same speaker it was back in '98 with 23 years worth of technology behind it. So it's exactly the same but totally different.
Yeah, so if you have one from the 90s, go ahead and buy the new one, drop it in the same box.
Yeah, pawn it off in your little brother, your nephew, and get a new, better one.
Okay, so John, for the guy or girl that can actually build their own high-quality enclosure, what do you suggest for this woofer?
All right, well, this is a very versatile woofer. It's going to work in a lot of different applications. Now, one of the big questions we get asked is, what is the differences in the enclosure types? Well, kicker woofers are designed to work primarily in 3 different types of applications. First one, the most accurate, the smoothest, and best sounding overall is going to be infinite baffle. That's where the speaker is actually just put on a board and fired up through the rear deck or through the back seat of your vehicle. It's got great smooth response. In fact, it's got the most accurate response and the deepest bass. The problem is it doesn't have as much power handling or as much output. So to basically give you more output, you put it in a sealed box. The sealed box is going to be an acoustic suspension or an air suspension or an air spring. That'll help control the cone movement of this speaker. It's going to give you more power handling, more output, but you're going to sacrifice just a little bit of that low-end response. Then you get into vented enclosures like we have here. A vented enclosure, also known as a bass reflex enclosure, will actually take the back pressure wave, because the speaker moves in and out, it creates a pressure and a vacuum in alternating cycles, and it'll take that pressure wave and it'll tune it in line with the front wave so that you get kind of a boost in output, kind of like a turbocharged engine uses the exhaust gases to put more air into the engine. So we get the same effect here. We get a more efficient speaker, which means we get more output with less power. So we get great bass, but once again, we're going to sacrifice a little bit more of that low-end bass. So if you want very smooth, accurate sound, but you're not worried so much about output, infinite baffle is awesome. In fact, that's what a lot of your factory speakers, in fact, your door speakers are all infinite baffle, and most of your dash speakers are too. If you want really tight, clean, hard-hitting bass with a lot of power handling, sealed box is the way to go. But if you just really want to bang, you just really want to jam, that's where you want to go for the ported box. For the most output, and like I say, the most efficiency, you can get by with a smaller amp to get the same amount of output.
Thank you, John. If you go to kicker.com, we've got a whole tech brief section. If you want to read through there, you'll actually get John explaining to you what he just said, but in much greater depth.
And probably a little slower.
And a lot slower at your own pace. And then you'll get a lot more information on building your own enclosure.